Hey everyone, John Mark Dugan. I'm back. So this is part 2 of my video of my interview with CBS 60 Minutes. I actually had high hopes to speak to the self-proclaimed pillars of journalistic integrity, wishing for a real dialogue, a real discussion. I thought they really were interested in what I was doing, why I was doing it. But sadly, what you're about to watch isn't just an interview. It's a premeditated hit job by the so-called journalist Cecilia Vega and her team at CBS 60 Minutes, who never intended this to be a real interview. Now, from the opening question, their strategy was obvious. Loaded accusations, false dilemmas, guilt by association, and an unrelenting push to corner me into admissions. They cut me off whenever I tried to clarify, demand that I try to prove negatives, and refuse to engage with facts that didn't fit their narrative. In short, this wasn't a quest for the truth. It was a blatant attempt at ambush journalism. I'm broadcasting this preemptively because after the interview started, I realized they were acting in very bad faith. I have no doubt they won't air the full answers or let you judge them in context, because my answers directly expose the mainstream media's own distorted tactics. That's why I put this book together. That's why I have it during my interview. So they did not like this. This is the reason so many people have lost faith in the press. They see how mainstream media outlets will twist any conversation to fit a sensational or politically motivated storyline. This is why CBS 60 Minutes is being sued for billions. They have not learned a thing. Let's get started.
I'm going to start by saying, just so we have it on the record, that you have not agreed to the disclaimer that we read you about broadcasting our footage, and we will go ahead and I'm going to ask you some questions now, okay?
Okay.
Why are you talking to us?
Well, I think there's a big misunderstanding of what I have done, why I have done it, my motivations, and frankly, who I work for.
Who do you work for?
Myself.
Do you work for the Russians, the Russian government in any capacity?
Nope. That's silly.
It's silly, you say.
It is.
Let's talk about one of the stories that you did. One of your stories that got a lot of pickup was about President Zelensky's aides buying 2 yachts for him.
Yes.
Why'd you make that up?
Well, who said I made it up?
Did you not?
Well, there's truth to it.
Is there?
Of course. These stories that have been put out on some of my sites, they're every bit as honest as the stories that have hit sites on the mainstream media. In fact, if it's not dishonest, why don't people investigate it? Why did Zelensky come on television saying that he doesn't know where $100 billion of the money that has been sent from America to Ukraine has gone? So if it's not honest, you tell me where that money went.
So I understand what you're saying. You're saying, as you sit here today, you believe that President Zelensky's aides bought 2 yachts for him. That's not true. There's no truth to that, right? You know that.
Well, I know that is every bit as honest as when the mainstream media, including your organization, reported that Russia blew up its own pipeline.
Those are 2 totally different issues. They're
not different issues. We're talking about credibility and trust in the media, okay?
Credibility. This story got traction here in Washington and got picked up by members of Congress.
That's great.
Where they spoke about it.
That's fantastic. And
it's not true.
Well, how do you know? Did anybody ever investigate where that money has gone in Ukraine? Has anybody investigated? No, they've tried to, but they've been shut down at every single opportunity.
So big picture, do you admit to lying about stories?
I admit to being absolutely as honest as the rest of the media. And I have here a list, a very big list of, well, many stories. It's a whole book that the mainstream media has done since 2016, okay? And if we want, we can compare the honesty of my story to the honesty of these mainstream media narratives. I can go
But what
through
does
them.
that? Well, that's fine. I appreciate you bringing the book, but I'm here to talk about your work.
Well, I think we should talk about...
You don't pretend to be dealing in facts, right? You make no apologies for that.
I deal in facts the way that every other journalist in the mainstream media has been dealing in facts.
You've said in the past you don't try to justify it and say you're being honest and objective.
Well, I've said in the past that I'm also not a journalist, okay? I don't hold myself to the same standards as these so-called journalists hold themselves, like the New York Times, the Washington Post. In fact, the story that came out about me in the Washington Post was done by an author by the name of Catherine Belton, who was successfully sued by Roman Abramovich for falsifying details, okay, and defaming him and claiming that he had ties to Putin. While she's claiming that I have ties to the Russian government. It's insane.
What? Why do you say that that's insane? You're sitting in an apartment in Moscow, surrounded by servers. Did you buy all of those?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did. Do you know how much they cost?
No idea.
They're cheap. They're cheap. By the way, just a quick note about their rooms full of servers. No. We got, starting at the bottom, battery backup, which is just like any regular full or standing battery backup, but this one's meant for a rack. We have, just for plugs, we have my desktop computer that I bought a $50 rack mounted case for and decided to put it in there. I have my storage server where I keep movies. As you can see, there's only 5 drives in there. You have 2 little micro computers that I have for my televisions, and a network switch. So that's it. That's my room full of servers. What, $3,000 at the most, and that's only because my my PC is a gaming PC, and I have a flight simulator set up. So that is the cost. That is why I got my TV, and then my media server TV, and then my little office desk, which that's hooked to my gaming PC and that's hooked to my server. So it's not like I have like a whole room full of servers. I got 2 computers in there and 2 little microcomputers. It's ridiculous. This thing's tiny. This thing's only up to my waist. So, a couple of $1,000.
How does an American former law enforcement officer, a former Marine, end up in Moscow spreading disinformation for the Russians?
I don't spread disinformation for the Russians, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing, how did I wind up here? Well, I used to be a deputy sheriff, and we had a group of guys running around beating minorities, and I came forward about this. And after this, I was run out of law enforcement. If you want to go into a lot of detail about this, we can, but I think you understand what happens to cops when they cross that thin blue line. And this is why cops don't cross that thin blue line. And they, well, at the least, they don't rat on each other. At the most, they will lie for each other. And, you know, this is a culture that needs to stop in American law enforcement. But unfortunately, anybody who tries to stop that culture ends up, well, like I am here.
You accused a U.S. presidential candidate of a hit and run of a teenager. That never happened. You're accusing the president of Ukraine of buying yachts. There's no evidence that's happened. Mm-hmm. You produced the Miami Chronicle out of Moscow. You're doing all this to help the Russians, right?
First of all, no. I'm not doing it to help the Russians, okay? Um, who benefits from this? Who benefits from what I do? Well, first of all, most of the articles on my sites are from mainstream outlets. It's automatic, right? I don't do anything for these. The second thing is, Russia has nothing to do with this. You know, I know Ukrainians. I know Russians. I know Ukrainians that have died. I know Russians who have died. And until you actually go to Donbass for yourself, and it's funny because all these fact checkers, these supposed fact checkers, and I've invited them many times to come to Donbass with me and just speak to random people, they won't do it. Why? Because there is a narrative that the mainstream media wants to spin, okay? And they want to spin this for a political purpose. They want to spin this for the United States government. So, you know, you can accuse me of doing this for the Russian government, but I'm financed by myself. I do everything with my own funds. I do everything with my own equipment.
Who are you doing it for?
Huh?
Who are you doing it for? Who does this benefit, in your opinion?
It benefits the Russian troops and the Ukrainian troops. You know why? Because when they're not fighting, they're not dying.
But a story about Kamala Harris and a hit and run of a teenager?
Is it true? I don't know.
It's not true.
Well, how do you know?
It's not true. There's zero
Well,
evidence
how do you
that
know?
Kamala
Were you
Harris
there?
was in a hit and there's zero evidence that that's happened.
There's zero evidence that a lot has happened. Doesn't mean that it's not true.
A lot of people will watch this and call you a traitor.
Mm-hmm.
Are you?
Absolutely not. Do you want me to expound on that?
Sure.
The reason I'm in Russia is because I was protecting American citizens. I guess you would say, less privileged American citizens. Ones that didn't have a voice, okay? And we can sit here and debate that all you want, but, you know, it was because I sent information to Internal Affairs, and then when they refused to do anything, I sent the information to the newspaper. That's how all this started. This is how this became the end of my law enforcement career, okay? And then it was nothing but internal affairs investigations and all this other stuff. I was deputy of the year 2 times in the year that I was forced to leave the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. But you'll never hear about that from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. They'll say, well, he resigned while he was under investigation. But these were frivolous investigations that they started just to push me out in retaliation. That's the first thing. The second thing is I'm sticking up for the American people because they have a right to know where their money is going. And it is absolutely not going to where their government is telling them it is going. I interviewed a Ukrainian commander, okay, Michael Mayman, and you can look him up. He was one of Zelensky's goons. And make no mistake about it, he's a bad dude. He's a narcotics sales. He traffics narcotics. He traffics weapons. But you know what? He left Ukraine and he told me how the Ukrainian government was manufacturing synthetic narcotics and making $600,000 or $900,000 every single day by peddling it to their own frontline troops. And he told me how he personally took 10 Javelin missiles, American Javelins, to Dubai to sell on the black market. Okay?
Let me respectfully interrupt you and ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Is anything off limits to you? Is there anything that you wouldn't lie about? Any topic, any person?
Of course. Like what? See, I like how you're casting this. Let me ask you a question. Is there anything off limits to the mainstream media, to CBS? Because you guys pushed the Hunter Biden laptop hoax. You guys pushed the Nord Stream pipeline hoax. You guys said that the Russians were bombing the Zaporozhye power plant. And guess what? When that was happening, I was in the Zaporozhye power plant interviewing the Russian military. So, what
But you said yes. So what is off limits?
do you mean, what's off limits?
You said, when I asked, is anything off limits, you said yes.
See, you're spinning this around. You're making this some argument like it's all about me. But this is a bigger conversation than me. What is off limits for journalists in general?
Well, you're not answering the question. You're the one sitting who agreed to do an interview. So this is about you. This is a story about you and the work you've done. You knew that coming into this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. But there has to be some accountability from both sides.
Do you regret any of the false stories that you've told?
Why do you keep calling them false?
Are you sitting here today saying that you've never written a false story? You've never produced a false story on any of your websites that were in the United States?
Like what?
I'm asking you. That was a super straight, simple question.
I've said this before. My stories are every bit as credible as all of the stories in this put out by the mainstream media.
What do you want the American people to know?
Well, I want them to know that they've been lied to. I want them to know that they've been lied to by their government. I want them to know they've been lied to by the media, the mainstream media, and that's not just the liberal ones. I mean, that's all of them.
John, they've been lied to by you, right? On the websites that you've produced.
As I said, I'm every bit as honest as the stories that are on your sites. In fact, even more so, because I encourage people to look into where that money has gone into Ukraine. I encourage this. Whereas when people question if Russia actually did bomb the Nord Stream pipeline, this was a conspiracy theory, and you guys were shaming everybody. So, you can say that I'm dishonest, but in fact, I'm encouraging people to actually look into the facts. It's the American government that's dishonest, and it's the American government who refuses to answer where that money is actually going. And like I said, Zelensky just recently said he doesn't know where $100 billion has gone. So what does this tell you? Did he buy yachts? Probably. Did his wife buy diamonds? I imagine so. I mean, all his ministers are...
Probably and imagine are not facts.
Well, it's not a fact when you guys say that Russia bombed the Nord Stream pipeline. This is ridiculous. Where did you guys even source this from? Where did you guys source any of these ridiculous narratives? And I'm not singling out CBS by any means. In fact, I've done a lot of research, and CBS seems to be one of the better ones. But my God, ABC and MSNBC, where do they get any of this stuff? And for 4 years, you guys sat there and you guys not, I'm talking generally the mainstream media, you guys sat there and lied about what Donald Trump said in Charlottesville for 4 years, and finally only did they correct it when they realized that Donald Trump was probably going to become the president again, and they were running scared. So, you guys have a lot more to answer for than I do. You guys have a much bigger audience. You guys have a lot more integrity, as you guys call it. Well, you're supposed to. But it's a farce.
Thank you for your time, John.
Hmm?
No. I just did that. Thank you, John.
Sorry, it didn't go your way.
Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And there you have it. A textbook display of bad faith journalism, riddled with gotcha questions, innuendo, and smug interruptions. Clearly wanted a neat little soundbite that they could parade around and show that I'd been caught. No doubt they will cut out the very responses that call out their own unethical practices. Throwing out unsubstantiated claims and not showing my unedited answers as you saw in their disclaimer that they don't want you to see, have proven my point. They're the ones peddling spin and half-truths. The truth is, the mainstream media often accuse others of precisely what they are doing themselves. They demand accountability, but won't let the public to hear the full story. They demand honesty, but they make up false report after false report. They ignore the obvious facts and logic to craft the narratives that will benefit them the most. If they truly cared about getting the facts out there, they'll have aired my answers in their entirety, especially the parts that condemn their own deceptive reporting methods. Will they? But instead, they'll slice and dice the footage to fit their predetermined narrative. That's why I'm sharing this with you myself, to let you see how they work, to show you who's really distorting reality and who's actually trying to talk facts. I hope this video encourages you to be skeptical, to speak out against these tactics, and to hold powerful media outlets accountable for the very same spin that they often accuse others like me of. I'm John Mark Dugan. I'm wishing all of my citizens from America the best. Goodbye.